And with this, we reach the end of our episode for today. Continue the clip to more than 500 likes to get the next part as soon as possible, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel in appreciation of my efforts. 5 years ago, when Will was 10 years old, everyone in the academy used to mock him because he was the only one who couldn't use magic. It was rare for a student at the prestigious Regarden Academy to be devoid of magical talent. All the students thought the school only allowed him to enroll because he was friends with Elfaria, and since Elfaria had become a Magia Vander, they considered getting rid of him and expelling him from the academy. Poor Will suffered from unprecedented bullying and remained lonely within the school walls. Currently, Professor Werkner took Will to the academy's headmistress, Calderon, who gave him this small sword and then attacked him with her powerful magic. It was then that Will's legendary talent with the sword emerged, shocking even the teacher Werkner with his strength. The headmistress allowed him to continue attending the academy despite his lack of magical talent, but Werkner objected to her decision. The headmistress told him that the sword became a magical staff in Will's hand, which was proof of his immense power. Will started to cry, and all he wanted was to become strong enough to climb the tower and reach Elfaria. The headmistress told him, "If you work diligently, it is possible that you might become a Magia Vander, despite your lack of magical talent." From that moment, Will became diligent in his studies. Teacher Meichner explained to them the method of climbing the tower, which involved first reaching the high institution. To become a Magia Vander, one must be recognized by the high institution, and there are 2 ways to achieve this. The first is to create a new type of magic, and the second is to earn no less than 7,000 points in the academy. The second method is considered easier than the first, so the majority of students rely on collecting points. The teacher warned them that they should first think about graduating from the school before thinking about reaching the high institution. As for poor Will, he didn't succeed in either method. He was a failure in magic, which meant he couldn't create new magic or collect points in the academy. He left the class feeling depressed, having failed to earn even a single point from the spell tests. Nonetheless, he didn't lose hope and wanted to double his efforts to become a Magia Vander. While Will was walking with Colette, they encountered a group of students. Mersey told them that Cyan had defeated an evil monster, a monster worth 10 points. All the students then believed that Cyan was powerful and would soon reach the tower, but in reality, Mersey was lying to them. He had defeated the monster by himself, and Cyan had seen it with his own eyes. As Will passed by him, he felt intense anger toward, feeling jealous of him for defeating a strong monster despite his failure in casting spells, wanted to hit him, but controlled his temper and left. Will didn't care about him and hid from Colette what had happened between them. At the same time, Teacher Edward went to the headmistress and asked her to expel Will immediately, but she refused, saying that Will had worked hard to reach the 6th year, and it wouldn't be fair to expel him. Edward insisted on his opinion, saying that the academy needed someone proficient in magic, not a failure like Will, who couldn't even cast the weakest spells. The headmistress showed Edward Will's statistics and proved that he didn't deserve to be expelled. She told him that even if we ignored the fact that he couldn't use magic, he was so outstanding that the word talented was an understatement. Even if he failed to become a Magia Vander, he could still become a craftsman or a healer. But Edward knew that Will's only goal was to become a Magia Vander, and that he wouldn't accept any job other than climbing the tower. Therefore, he considered Will's presence in the academy a waste of time. The headmistress decided that Will would be tested again, but this time the test would be administered by Edward. If Will failed to pass the test, he would be banned from using magic. Since he wasn't allowed to carry his sword at school, he always left it in the locker. After Will went to the study hall and studied the history of magic, he was extremely diligent in his studies and excelled over all the students in writing. He aimed to leverage this to avoid losing even a single point to qualify for the high institution. From the sheer exhaustion of studying, a white hair appeared on his head, and the crazy Colette was excited to remove it for him. But Teacher Edward interrupted them and ordered Will to go immediately to the spell room. Indeed, Will went with him, as Edward wanted to get rid of him. Edward immediately used his terrifying magic and told Will, "Your task is to hit me with one attack. If you succeed, I will reward you with 5 points in spells. But if you fail, I will expel you from this academy." A disaster has befallen our hero. Will face Edward, known for his immense power. He attacked swiftly with his magical prowess. Teacher Werkner went to the headmistress, who had summoned him to witness what was happening with his student, Will. He was shocked and seemed like he wanted to intervene, but the headmistress prevented him from stopping Edward's test. She wanted him to acknowledge Will's worthiness to study at the academy and to see for himself if Will was worthy of attempting to become a Magia Vander. But Werkner saw this test as too harsh for Will, since he was facing Edward, who was closest to becoming a Magia Vander, having already reached the top of the tower before him. Edward cast a low-level dark magic spell at Will, who used his incredible speed and tried to strike him from behind. But Edward created a magical shield around himself and hit Will with a tremendous magical force, nearly knocking him out. Poor Will was in deep trouble. It seemed impossible to even touch his terrifying opponent, with no gaps in Edward's defenses, as if he were facing a monster thirsty for his blood. Edward wanted to burn him with black flames, summoning 1,000 spells simultaneously to bombard him with dark magic. Will had no other choice but to flee, but he was trapped amidst a barrage of powerful spells. In this situation, he would lose the test and be expelled from the academy. All Will wished for was to get his sword to fight with. Meanwhile, Colette was worried about Will, knowing Edward's harsh nature and thinking that Will was being whipped. At that moment, Kiki entered, wounded, and pointed to Will's locker, making Colette understand that Will needed his sword. As Will was about to lose, having been severely defeated by the fierce Edward, even when he tried to stand, Edward stepped on his head and mocked him for being talentless in magic, saying, "Give up your foolish ambitions. You'll never become a Magia Vander, you weakling." But Will refused to back down, wanting to reach Magia Vander, and Edward asked him why he insisted, despite his weakness, on climbing the tower. He replied, "I want to be with the one I love. I want to keep the promise I made to Elfaria." This angered Edward even more because Will aimed to become a Magia Vander for his love for Elfaria. Our hero was determined to see the beautiful sunset with Elfaria. At that moment, Colette arrived with his sword. The excitement began, dear viewers, as our hero Will would shine. Edward attacked him with his dark magic, but he cut through it effortlessly with his sword. Edward unleashed all his dark magic in the area, making Will feel afraid, as he would burn under a terrifying barrage of 1,000 flames. He was facing the monster, Edward, who had reached the status of a Magia Vander. But this was Will's path to overcome his weakness, and he had to succeed in the test. Will charged towards the magical barrage without fear, and with his incredible speed, he successfully penetrated Edward's dark magic. Then, he leaped into the sky and descended with such force that he broke through the magical shield surrounding his opponent and managed to strike Edward. Thus, Will passed Edward's test and earned 5 points. From the pressure he endured during this test, his head began to steam. The headmistress was pleased with his success. Will, who had failed in magic, succeeded with just his sword in piercing Edward's dark magic. And with this, we reach the end of our episode for today. Continue the clip to more than 500 likes to get the next part as soon as possible, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel in appreciation of my efforts.